Do you have a coffee there? I saw you drinking something.
I got my water too.
Oh, okay. What are you a coffee drinker or not?
No, man, I'm an energy
Oh,
drinker.
really?
I can't like I'm trying to cut down and trying to go to a little more coffee. I know again, like I don't know, everything depending on what you read isn't good for you. I know that I got to cut down a bit on my caffeine intake. So that's been something in
Huh?
my mind recently.
Yeah, that was me a couple of months ago. I was like, I need to quit energy drinks, and I have done a decent job, to be fair.
Yeah.
What was your favorite energy drink?
C4, man. I like the
It's good
I
for.
like yeah, I like the face tingles. It brings me back to like when I was taking pre-workout and would get the face tingles.
What about the white monster?
I do like a white monster.
Yeah, bro.
We have vending machines up in our office, and there's a white monster in there. So if I'm in a pinch,
That's
I get a white monster every once in a while.
yeah. That's in at Miami. We used to have a vending machine with the white monster as well, but they always run out. So I was like,
Mm.
stop it, guys! Like, stop it! This is my second. Yeah, this is my second training session. Let's go. You guys are killing me. But no, I moved to coffee now, so I live by coffee.
Are you just black coffee, or what do you put with it?
No, straight black, straight
Yeah.
black. Honestly. Well, I also drink the mate sometimes, but with the mate, it's like the pain of carrying around and
No, it's a
making it.
whole yeah.
Yeah, and then stuff like that. Awesome, awesome. All right, so let's go straight to a small introduction for people that are listening. Everything. Have okay. I hope I don't mispronounce the name again. Brady, straight away, right?
Hmm.
Okay, I don't know why I have so much problem with that name, Brady, Brady, Brady. But anyways, we have Brady. We have known each other from online world basically. We got to meet on a ECNL event in Arizona. I know. I think this is the beautiful about the goalkeeper niche. Like you get to meet incredible people, you get to have conversations. He was humble enough to jump in a call, and I don't know. I'm excited. I'm excited for this because again, like I have known about him from probably like a couple of years, like 4 years probably. I'm not
Yeah.
sure since ODP and stuff like that. So I'm really curious. Hopefully, the goal of today is to talk about college, the environment, the recruiting, and stuff like that. So really excited for people that are just knowing to know your name, Brady. Something. Tell us a little bit introduction about you.
Yeah.
Besides
So
the C4 obsession right now.
I know, huh? So my name is Brady Moody. I'm an assistant coach right now at Loyola University in Chicago. Um, grew up here in the Chicagoland area, and then went out to, a shared space that Juan and I both have out to Oklahoma. Um, Played at the University of Tulsa, and then started coaching there. From there, went to be an assistant coach at the United States Air Force Academy, and then had a really cool opportunity to jump over to the women's side and jump closer to home, back where I grew up at in the Chicagoland area. And so, yeah, now here at Loyola Chicago.
That's amazing. And okay, you mentioned that you played as well. So
Hmm.
where did the goalkeeping life started? Like you always was the goalkeeper, or how did all the things started?
Yeah, my family's a big soccer family. I think kind of maybe rarer for like the American kid my age or the American player my age is that like my mom played college soccer, my uncle played professional soccer, my aunt played college soccer. So for me, soccer was always the sport that was in my household. Tried out, was terrible at baseball, didn't like
Hmm.
getting hit in football. Right, terrible jump shot in basketball. So none of those things ever stuck, and soccer was the one that did. And then I think also like a lot of goalkeepers that I've had experience talking to, like was probably one of the few players that weren't just terrified of going in goal during when teams were young and you just rotate through. I remember pretty vividly one of my best friends. It was on my just rec team, and I won't say his name because he was crying when it was his turn to go into goal, and I was like, hey, like it's all good, I'll do it because I didn't want my friend to have to go through something that he hated. And so
Yeah.
from there, yeah, it just stuck. And again, like my background of my family playing soccer, my parents were very like, hey, you're not just going to be a goalkeeper, you're going to be able to do more things than that. So the rule up until I got into high school that whatever team I was on, I was going to play half on the field and then half in goal. And
Hmm.
so again, but the goalkeeping was always something that I loved, and it was never a thought to give that piece away. And so I think it finds, talking with other goalkeepers and talking with other goalkeeper coaches, I think the position, finds you in a different way. Everyone has their own way that they found the position, but I think the love for it and the like obsession with it is obviously kind of what we all share.
Excited to hear like your playing experience in college, also how the transition went from playing to coaching and all this stuff. But something that I want to bring up, and I think you also kind of mentioned it, how the position finds you. I was listening to a Spaniard goalkeeper coach, and one of the questions they made him is like, how do you teach a kid to dive or stuff like that? Like if he's scared of diving, and he's like, you don't teach him, you get a
Yeah.
new one. And it's part of it. Like you need to be obsessed. You need to be crazy. Personally, me, I don't remember the day that I was like, oh, I want to be a goalkeeper. But I don't know. There is something about that of like me diving, going around, just hitting the ball, all this stuff that really fulfill me. And I think that's the way that you feel as well, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. It's like, everyone always has, everyone always says that goalkeepers are a little off in the head, but it is something that you do have to want to do, right? You do have to want to get into, get on the ground, roll around, dive around on the ground, and be, willing and able to do those things. That's a massive part of it.
Yeah, and I don't know if that occurs to you, but it definitely happens to me. And probably I had a lot of concussions. But like we joke with the goalkeepers about the goalkeeper sumis, if I'm pronouncing it properly.
Mm,
That you have moments of goofiness. You're
yeah.
just like, "Yeah, I want to dive, I want to do this stuff." So I think that's that's hilarious. Goalkeepers are weird, mate. They're such a weird word. All right, so you went like you said you played when you were a young, and then how did that transition to college started?
Yeah,
So.
so I was, back before now MLS Next, but I was playing in the DA Development Academy. It was then, and yeah, like I think it was just a thing of kept loving to play soccer and was like, hey, if I can continue to do this, then that's all good. Like let's continue to keep playing. And so ended up my family, my parents moved from Chicagoland area down to South Carolina right when I graduated high school, and so we had known about that for probably a year leading into it. And so initially, I went and did my first semester at University of South Carolina Upstate down in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Wanted to kind of stay close to home and thought that yeah, being able to be in and around my family was what I wanted out of my college experience. And then um, it was a Division I program, but it was a position that I probably could have stayed there and played, a lot of games over my, 3, 4 more years that I had left there. But, I kind of made the decision that, I maybe being right 20 minutes down the road from my parents wasn't exactly
Mhm.
what I wanted to do, but also that, I knew that, yeah, I wanted to try to get the most out of myself as an athlete, along with my education too. So I ended up making the decision and transferred to Tulsa. And yeah, I think like, it does take, a lot. Like I'm not saying that I wasn't a good player, but when I got to Tulsa, I was kind of I would say a pretty average, Division I, high level Division I goalkeeper. Like I probably played in around 10 games in my college career, but being in a really high level environment, I know that when I finished playing, like I was the best version of myself that I could have been. And then, like every male soccer player, I thought freshman, sophomore year, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this for 2, 3 more years, and then I'm gonna go find somewhere to play professionally. And again, like, I was a pretty perennial second string goalkeeper, and that just wasn't, in the cards for me. It wasn't good enough to make that next jump. And my whole life had been in and around soccer, and so I was like, all right, how do I keep the sport in my game? And or how do I keep the sport in my life? And so probably summer going into my junior year of college, I walked into our head coach's office and was like, hey, I think this is what I think I want to do. I think I want to be a coach. Like I would love if I could do it here, and kind of asking for some advice on how to do it. And so then, my junior year, I started kind of coaching with local youth clubs in and around Tulsa, did individual private sessions, and worked our summer camps that we had at Tulsa, just trying to get in and around the coaching environment to see, yeah, if it was really something that I wanted to do. And then, fell in love with that, just like I fell in love with the position of goalkeeping, and was really lucky that right as I finished, my playing career, I was able to stay at Tulsa and just kind of switch positions, switch hats, and hop onto the coaching staff.
Yeah, that's great. And I want to go deeper, of course, in the coaching aspect. But before we jump there, just thinking about what you're mentioning, and again, we're gonna also kind of talk a little bit more about this, the recruiting process. But whenever, if you will go back from the things that you already know, like as a coach or everything that you have experienced during all those years, like what advices will you have give yourself for that kid that is coming from high school and now is looking to find a university or stuff like that? And by the way, before we continue, this guy over here played Division 1, so he's talking short about himself. Division 1 is a big deal, right? So just parenthesis, but right, we can continue.
No, 100%. I think no, like soccer, and I have a couple. I have some cousins that are now kind of in that age where they're going to, deciding if they do want to play college soccer or not, and kind of going through the recruiting process and starting that. And so, it kind of works out perfectly that these are kind of the conversations that I've been having with them. Soccer is a weird sport recruiting wise, right? Like it's not a football where like, you know, somehow scouts are at your game and they watch your huddle film and then you get 10 offers, right? You see these football players on social media that have 30 Division 1 offers, and that's just because people have come out to watch them play. It's not like that in basketball where you're just playing on an AAU circuit and you know people just come and they watch you, right? Like there are the top players in high school, in club soccer that do get reached out to, but 99% of the time it's all the work that you do as the athlete to get noticed, right? So it's being really proactive in that process and understanding that like, hey, just because you're a good player or an above that, like it's not just going to happen for you. There's a lot of work that you need to do, and unfortunately, not now, like being a coach and being on the other end of it, like there are players and there are like a lot of stuff does unfortunately like slip through the cracks, right? Like we could be we'll use the like Phoenix, the Arizona ECNL example, right? Like you and I are watching the same game, but we might be just for a half second, our heads turn talking to each other and we miss something that happens, right? And so now instead of our notes being, fantastic goal scored by number 20 or whatever, we're like, all right, number 20 was, you know, okay. But, right, like if that number 20 does the work of after the event saying, hey, this is what I did, all this, here's the video, like, then I'll think, okay, that's how you kind of remedy that situation. And so I think probably when I was growing up and going through the process, I didn't understand maybe how much work I had to do in order to be seen, put myself in a positive light. And yeah, because at the end of the day, they're all job interviews, right? Like you're talking to every time you're on a phone with a college coach, or you're emailing a college coach, or you're at an ID, like those are all job interviews, right? And it's really important the way that you prepare yourself to go into those, but then also obviously how you execute, when you're in those environments. And so I think the proactiveness was something that I probably wasn't fantastic at during my recruiting process, and something that I continue to try to stress to the youth players.
Yeah. And also, just to add up a little bit on that sense, the reality of it as well is not about, of course, yourself, yes, but definitely like understand that you're competing with so many people around the world. Like you were putting the example of the NBA and stuff like that, like American football, and of course, like the big market about those sports are here. And like you said, like coaches will attend to the games and be more willing to just pull an offer from watching 1 or 2 games or just having a small track. However, like I feel in soccer, again, it's one of the most played sports all over the world. You're competing against me that I'm coming from Colombia.
100%.
All those
Yeah.
little things that are happening as well, people doing. So I'm a big believer on that. And I want to hear your thoughts because you have been through different environments as a coach as well on the recruiting process. So, for example, with me, and something that you mentioned, like I wasn't a big believer about ID camps. So I remember when I was an athlete, I always thought, oh, like I'm gonna waste my money of going there. But I do believe if you do like all your thought process about the university, and you know, like, okay, they have three goalkeepers, one of them is graduating, they're probably looking for another goalkeeper. If I'm reaching to to a people and being like, and asking the right questions, like, hey, are you guys looking for a goalkeeper? It will be something that interests you. And I'm good enough to show myself, like, I believe in myself that I can go in front of these coaches and actually make an incredible ID camp. Like, go for it. Like, understand that you have the four coaches or the coaching staff watching at you. So I think that's one of the tips that I will also give you. Like, for example, for me in Miami, again, if you're good enough, come to our showcase and shut us up. You know, show up and we'll be able to see you, and all of us will see you there. Because, like you mentioned, on those events, like, you might be late. I don't know. You might turn off, like you said, or stuff like that, or you just have a bad day, and things will happen. So I think that's crucial. So I don't know. I want to hear your thoughts about like how everything has worked, like on the different colleges, and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, and I think like to a greater point, like I think that too, like the ID camps are, I think sometimes online they get a bad reputation of,
Hmm.
like you said, like they are, that is how, money comes into the university for sure, right? And ourselves as coaching staffs, definitely get money from them, but like, it's not just a marketing tool for our university,
Hmm.
right? Like just for us here at Loyola, like we have 6 players coming in the 2026 class, and four of them came to ID camps, right? On the 2027 class, we have 8 players committed so far, and 5 of them came to ID camps, right? And so like it's not, they're they're important, right? Like there's a lot of good that can come from them, and I do think it's important to do your research to see, like you said, right? Like if I'm a goalkeeper and you know let's say Miami has 3 goalkeepers and they're all freshmen and sophomore, and I'm a senior in high school, it's probably not going to make a whole lot of sense for me to go to that camp, right?
Hmm.
But on the flip side, right, there's it's important to do the research, and I think also the research of seeing, you know again, the pathway that university uses. If it is, kids come to their ID camp, they do well, they get an offer, they come, like that's the proof's in the pudding there. And so, I do think ID camps are very important, and everywhere that I've been, both at or all at, University of Tulsa, at Air Force, at here at Loyola, like we pulled kids from ID camps consistently. We pulled kids from our own ID camps. We would often go out and work, other universities' ID camps. Like when I was at Air Force, University of Denver was just an hour down the road, and they put on a fantastic 3-day ID camp, and it has 40 different colleges at it. The 40 college coaches that are there aren't just there to chat with their buddies; they're there to find players, and we found multiple players there from that event, as did other coaches that were at it as well. Same thing at Tulsa. We had ID camps that we invited 8 to 10 different universities to. Yeah, and again, like I think it's important to do your research on the front end, but I think ID camps are a really, really valuable resource. Just like you said, if you believe in yourself as a player, then it's a perfect opportunity to prove it. And on the flip side of it, or kind of going along with that, like the people that are at ID camps are like, that's the, we talked about competing against, players all around the world, but like that's the big crop of players that you're competing against, right?
Yeah.
Because if I'm going to Loyola's ID camp, then at some level I'm interested in Loyola. Every other player that's at that ID camp is also has some sort of interest in Loyola, right? And so that's also it's a really good opportunity to put yourself up against other players that we might be looking at that we tried to get to that event, but then also a good way to like have a reality check to see, all right, like am I at this level? These are players that they're looking to recruit. Am I at the level?
Yeah, that's perfect. I love that you mentioned the last part about the reality check, because you need to be honest. No, like I said at the beginning, like Brady, he played Division 1. Not everybody can come and play Division 1, so you need to have that reality check and being honest. Like, okay, do I actually fit on an ACC team? Do I actually fit on a Sunbelt team? Do I actually fit on Division 2, NAIA? But of course, if you come, you are an average player, or and you're trying out for University of North Carolina, you're gonna come back saying like, "Oh, they just stole my money." But in reality, is that you don't fit the metrics of the team.
Yeah.
So again, reality check crucial there. Um, Regarding the recruiting process, What advice will you give to any goalkeeper like starting to recruit? I know we go to all these like, ID camps, and one of the most I feel like one of the most asked questions is like, "Oh, are you guys reading our email? Should we email you? Like, how do you think is the best way to approach you, understand more about like the recruiting process, basically?"
Yeah, for sure. And on that point, like, yes, emails get read, right? I think sometimes like they do get buried because I won't speak for you, but just for me, like I know the amount of emails that I get a day, and it's a lot, right? Now I do my work to make sure I try to get through all those. But like when we were just in Texas for the ECNL event, and the schedule that I was looking at every day on my paper was made up by looking to see who emailed us, right? Looking to see who emailed us, and then making sure that we had their game circled to go to, right? We had the regional teams that we always go to see, but then I also would see teams, right? I went to go watch teams from the West Coast because girls emailed us and they have some sort of connection or interest in Loyola Chicago, right? Same thing with girls from the South. We don't typically get a ton of players from southern states in the U.S., but girls emailed us that they're interested, and we go and watch those games, right? And so I think when you're going to events, when you're looking to get noticed, it goes back to just like being as proactive as you can, sending out as much information as you can, and making sure that my goalkeeper coach I had growing up, I think said it the best. He said, "Be persistent without being a pest." Right? Like be persistent, show that you're interested, continue to show that interest without being like over the top emailing every 24 hours, right? Because I will say like that kind of does give you, I see it again. I'm like, oh, XYZ is emailing again and again and again and again, right? And so there's different ways I think you can be really proactive and be persistent on it without maybe pushing it a little bit over the top. But no, and then I think like kind of going along with your question, you know, of like when you're at these events and these things, like again, it's a it's a job interview, right? And it's a job interview because when we bring a player into our program, like it has Loyola across their chest, right? And so every time that our girls are doing anything on campus, anytime any of our girls are doing anything out in the city of Chicago, like for better for worse, people will know them and recognize them, and will have the association of Loyola Chicago women's soccer on them, right? And so if things are good, then that shows really good and shows our program in a good light. If it's not so good, then it comes back to us on the coaching staff of, wow, this player is doing XYZ, in their free time. And so I think like to say that, meaning like the play and the skill level is going to speak for itself, right? Like there is, of course, right, like a baseline standard and a baseline skill level that you have to play, that you have to play at Loyola or to play at Miami, for example, right? But then there's a lot of players that fit the level, but because of maybe how they fit or interact with their teammates, they might not. We might decide to go a different way because that's not what we want within our program, right? How they treat their opponents, right? Same thing. Like there's a competitive level, but there's also being a good person, right? And so I think there's a lot of things that you can do outside of just your actions on the ball and your actions off the ball that when we're at these events, like coaches really do take a notice of. And people always tell you that, you always have to think that someone's watching. Well, like the reality is when there's, 70 coaches on the sideline watching your game, like there's a likelihood someone's watching you at every moment, right? Or if you're at an ID camp, someone's probably watching you at every moment, right? And so can you put your best foot forward to show that, hey, I'm a really good person. I'm the type of person that you want to have in your program.
Hmm. And we will. This will be kind of the last question for players at some point, and then hopefully we can go more into like answering questions for goalkeeper coaches. But like for the standard of like a player, like what do you think will be as a goalkeeper specifically will be like the best way to sell themselves? Like, of course, I have emailed you, I am gonna be in this event and stuff like that. I don't know, like, how do you like that email to be formulated? What kind of videos do you like? And then whenever you go to the field, like, what are you looking for? And all those little things, like from a player perspective, what are things
Yeah.
that will help with the recruiting?
Yeah, I think right, like on the email, I think I really like to see. All right, obviously, like your highlight video as a goalkeeper is so important. It's so important for every position on the field, but like most importantly for the goalkeeper, right? Because we could go to watch a match for 90 minutes and you might touch the ball three times with two of those being goal kicks. Like those are things you can't control, right? And so The highlight video is super important. I think on top of that, like I really like to watch training videos,
Hmm.
and not like edited videos of you going over a cone to make a upper 90 save 4 times in a row, but like I want to see what your training environment looks like, right? I want to see what how you react to failure within that training environment, right? Like all those things are what we're going to experience on a daily basis if you do decide to come here and it works out and I'm running you through a session every day, right? Like that's what it is. So I like seeing those yeah, training videos as well, I think are a really good
Hmm.
tool to add into emails and to have kind of on your profile as well. No, but then when it gets to the actual event, right? I think um, Stan Anderson, one of my coaches that I had growing up, really really well regarded and pretty famous goalkeeper coach. But he would always tell us a story about one time when he was working. I think he was working at Marquette at the time, and he showed up to an event and without his knowledge of knowing who it was, Zach Steffen was playing on the field that he was going to watch. And again, like didn't know how highly rated of a recruit he was, didn't really know who he was, but he knew that he was going to be, a top quality goalkeeper just because of the presence that he had. And he always said that you could like smell how good of a goalkeeper he was, right? Like you could just feel the presence that he had, right? And so I think that like you can go out to a field and you can, within 5 to 10 minutes of sitting and just kind of observing a goalkeeper, they might not have to touch the ball, but you can kind of get a grasp of who they are as a player, right? And you do that by the way that you communicate with your teammates. You do that by the way that you command, your area, by the way that you yeah, carry yourself. I think like one thing that maybe goes a little bit under the radar with goalkeepers is like you're supposed to be the security blanket for the team, right? Like obviously in terms of keeping the ball out of the net, but like when moments are hectic and they're chaotic in a game, like I love when a goalkeeper can be the one that like calms the team down, right? And does that by their communication, does that with the way that they talk to their teammates, not just the information they're given to them, but like how they convey that information is super important, right? Like if the game's chaotic and you're screaming like a chicken with your head cut off, like that just makes your team more chaotic, right? And makes a problem that maybe wasn't very bad worse, right? And so I
Hmm.
think I think if you think about those things and you think about maximizing that moment, like there's only so many times you're going to be able to make saves during the match, but it's all the things that aren't saving the ball that really like I think helps goalkeepers stand out the most at all these events.
Yeah, I think you touched on really important things, and it's funny that you mentioned, for example, the case of like screaming whenever things are going wrong, because that happened to me actually. That was a learning moment for me. I was in a tournament, and my center back got the ball. He was facing backwards, and I started yelling to ask for the ball. Like I was like, "Ball, ball, 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 ball," stuff like that. And then of course he passed it, whatever we did with that, and then he came back to me and he was like, "You are actually panicking me whenever you yell like that. Like you're not helping at all." So I always try to teach my goalkeepers to be like precise on their communication, demanding and stable on it, like left-footed, and that's it. Like you don't need to be like, hey, ball, 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 because like you said, I think it creates that atmosphere, like okay, panic mode. Everybody start panicking because I'm yelling. So it's crucial for goalkeepers. The
Yeah,
press.
sorry, one
Oh,
thing, one more thing on that one. I just think like that leadership, like the goalkeeper and I think we're gonna kind of get into this a little bit later, talking about just like the team environment and the training environment, right? Like
mhm.
regardless of if you're the first string goalkeeper, if you're the second string goalkeeper, if you're an all conference goalkeeper, like goalkeepers just have a massive leadership role within a team just because of the position that they play and how important that position is. And I think like one of the best things that you can do as a goalkeeper, whether it be at these events or whether it be when you're actually in the environment, like is understanding what different players need from you, right? Like there might be a different center back on your team that if you're getting on him like that and asking for the ball, like that helped him play better, right? Whereas maybe that center back needed a little something different, right? Like it's really important that goalkeepers understand the players in front of them where let's say your left center back makes a mistake and you can kind of get on them a little bit and that fuels them to be better, but then your right center back, it might be the ball goes out of play and you grab him, you put a little arm around his shoulder and you kind of have that more low-key individual talk with him. And so I think like the leadership traits, again, just kind of finishing that last point, like the leadership traits that goalkeepers show when they're out in these environments and at these events are that's as important as your ability to make saves.
Yeah, and all of that adds up to what we're speaking about, like that presence that you can sense from a goalkeeper, and that's the reality of it. Like a lot of times we go to the field and we like right away we already know like this is a great goalkeeper, and right away you're like, I'm not feeling this goalkeeper. How do you think, as a goalkeeper standpoint, like how do you develop that presence? Like, of course, you have mentioned like the communication and stuff like that, but what are your thoughts in developing that presence that we're talking
Yeah,
about?
yeah. I think I think two things. I think the relationships that you have with your teammates are, I think that's the biggest thing, right? Like the relationship that you have with, your center backs, to be able to understand which one needs different types of communication, but then also the relationship that you have with your teammates to be like, hey, I'm best friends with, a lot of this team, and they know how hard I'm going to fight to keep the ball out of the net, and they're going to do everything that they can to fight just as hard, right? And so then it kind of raises the level of everyone, and you have that, kind of you bring your whole team up with that sort of presence in those relationships that you have. So I think the relationship piece of it is massive. But then too, I think like knowledge of the game, right? Understanding the game is, I think, something that, maybe uh, I think like that's probably one of the biggest things I have for like my group is I don't know if the average player watches enough soccer, right? Like because there's so many moments that we can talk about in training. There's so many different little individual situations that we can go over and talk about. But the reality of it is, and I'm not saying I'm a soccer genius, but like a lot of the moments that I had when I was playing and ways that I navigated through it was because, oh, I saw, a goalkeeper do this in
Mhm.
some moments when I'm watching the game, right? And so I think like if you're watching the game and you model yourself, it doesn't even have to be like pros. It can be, we have a ton of, really high level youth clubs here in Chicago. And I think they do a really good job of coming out to, our matches, coming out to different universities here in Chicago to see what that level's like. And so they see how Loyola's goalkeeper holds herself, and she has a really great presence. Well, these are little mannerisms, little things that she did that
Mhm.
can help me. Or I watched the Euros over the summer, and I saw Hannah Hampton from um, England, and she did these different types of things, and I want to try to obviously push to be a really high level goalkeeper. So I'm going to try to do things that high level goalkeepers do. So I think the knowledge of the game is important, obviously, for every position on the field, but like goalkeepers, 1,000,000%. Just because the reality is that you have to, if the ball's in, if the opponent's on the attack and they're driving at our back line, like strikers on our team don't really have to worry about that situation, right? They're going to let the defenders defend and hopefully get the ball back to them, right? Whereas, you as a goalkeeper, even if the striker has the ball, you're still reading the situation and trying to organize and trying to problem solve during that, right? So you have to have such a big knowledge of the game compared to other players on your team, and I do think that that's how good goalkeepers can become great goalkeepers, is just with that knowledge of the game and what different situations require from them.
Yeah, 6,000% agree with all of that. And the sense of like, again, back to me, like my game improved so much. Actually, it's funny. I messed up my back a couple of days ago. On Friday, we were like scrimmaging with the girls, and I can barely move. Like I'm getting better, but like I can not dive and stuff like that. So most of my game was literally just positioning myself on the right position, and I was able to catch the ball, make the save, and stuff like that. Just because they're understanding the ring and all the little aspects that play such an important role. Same with Buffon, Gianluigi Buffon. If you don't know, was a goalkeeper. He retired super old, but he got better with the years. Diego Martinez, he got better with the years, and a lot of this comes out from maturity or believing more yourself, that trust that you create with your teammates, and understanding the concepts of the game more. I think it's crucial. And like you said, I think there is a huge gap on, and it might sound kind of wrong or not, and we can also talk about the men's and the women's side. But the men's are a little bit more involved on watching the game, being more active about loving the sport, playing FIFA, or all the little things that actually connect you to learning more, experiencing the game, watching the game, visualizing the game from a different point of view. Meanwhile, sometimes on the women's side, they are not as involved as the men's. And I think that creates a little bit of leverage from one side.
Do, and I do think that is, I will say I do think that's changing though, and I think it's changing because
Hmm.
of, right, like, in the early days, right, you talk about the 99ers, right, the US women's national team that won the World Cup in 1999, and you talk about, maybe why, the US women were, still are, but were very dominant, is because of, I think the athleticism in the early stages of the women's game, right? But the reality of it is that other countries are continuing to catch up, right? You look at the Spanish team, phenomenal, right? Some of the
Yeah.
soccer that they play, phenomenal, right? You look at England, like, unbelievable, right? And again, like, the U.S. is still competing at those standards, but I think the good part about that though is that the women's game has never been more accessible, right?
Hmm.
To your average player, right? Like, NWSL is starting up soon. Like, we're so lucky here in Chicago. The stars are training and playing games 15 minutes up the road, right? Everyone has a Paramount Plus, right? You have all these different subscriptions to different streamings, and you can watch every women's professional game now. And I think, like, one thing that I think our head coach does a really good job at, here at Loyola is, I think sometimes when you're trying to show clips and you're trying to educate players, it's there's different moments and different situations that happen if you're watching Man City versus Arsenal in the Premier League, or if you're watching Man City versus Arsenal in the Women's Super League, right? And so I think showing players clips of NWSL matches, showing players clips of USL Super League matches, showing players clips of WSL matches, like, those are things that I think are a lot more accessible now, and I think are really changing the landscape of women's soccer. Whereas, more girls are watching, are, um, invested in it from a young age, and that's how grow a generation and continue to grow generations of people that are, maybe as quote unquote, like, obsessed with soccer as, like the average boy is that watches nothing but Premier League all the time.
Yeah, and I'm excited to hear again, like your thoughts on your environment and how you develop the goalkeepers. But before we jump on those things, I do have two questions I have come across. First one, I mean, it's still sticking to the recruiting process, but shifting a little bit more to the goalkeeper coach perspective. What do you think is like crucial for us to observe, see? Because nowadays I feel like it's really tough to get a great goalkeeper. And also, we're recruiting so young. And again, like we just spoke about it, like goalkeepers develop a little bit late and stuff like that. So, what are some characteristics or what are some things that you believe that we need to be really mindful on? And also, just to make the question longer, that way you can forget about the question, but to make it longer, I feel like the NCAA sometimes, with all these rules and compliance, make it a little bit tough for coaches to really, really, really get to know the player. So sometimes you might end up with somebody with great highlights, but you don't really get to know them that well in their emotional part or stuff like that. So, what are alternative that coaches can deal with that as well? Like, how have you deal with all of this?
Yeah, no, I think I'll start with the second part because I'll forget it if I don't. But yeah, I think, like, it goes back to, I was talking about relationships with players on their own team, but also, like, the relationships that we form with everyone around a player is, like, how you get that full picture, right? Like, obviously you see them play. You try to. I also think that's why ID camps are such a great tool, because we get to, like, be hands on, right? Like, we get to
Hmm.
train with you. We get to put you through
Yeah.
a session. We get to see how you react to failure, see how you interact with people. Like, that's massive. But then also too, like, you um, for us a lot, we have a lot of really great clubs here in the Midwest that are within 2 hours of driving. And so the amount of times that myself or someone else on the coaching staff has, liked a player, but then we drive up and we observe their club team train and we, like, love the player afterwards. And it's because it gives us a little more insight into, those habits, who they are as people. And then again, like, as the when the because it starts so early, right? Like, I think the first part of the recruiting process is the skill level and the talent, right? Like, that's the first thing you observe and know and say, okay, like, yes, this player has the potential to be really good for us here at Loyola, or, okay, somewhere else might be the right place for her. But then, like, after you make that first initial thing, like that first initial contact or that first initial viewing of them, the rest of the process is getting to know them, right? It's getting to know the type of person they are, getting to know the type of family they come from, getting to know, right? All those things. And then, of course, like if you bring them on a visit, then they're hanging out with the players on your team, and you can see if there's someone that fits in that environment, right? And so I think the because of right in again going back to it, I transferred, right, so I'm not saying anything bad about the transfer portal or the way
Hmm.
that college sports are going, but things have become very transactional, right? Like, okay, what can you do for me? If you can't do it for me, then I'm going to go get someone else that can. But I do think there's still like the baseline of college sports and recruiting, and it has always been, and I think will continue to be relationship based, and it's
Yeah.
understanding how you fit in with different players on your team, understanding how you fit in with the coaching staff, and so a lot of the recruiting process is understanding that side of the player, not necessarily the um, the playing on the field. Obviously, again, important, but I think the relation side is even more massive. And then I think like going back to the first part when you're talking about what to look for, like I of course the technical, the tactical things are very important, but like for me, the biggest thing is competitiveness. How competitive are you as a player, as a person? Like every time that we're on the phone with a recruit, how competitive are you?
Hmm.
And all right, maybe it's very easy for them as players to say, "Yeah, I'm super competitive." Well, then like tell me about it. Okay, well, I maybe I had this injury and I was dying not playing and I got back, in X amount of months instead of whatever. Like there's ways that you can tell, yeah, you can gauge that competitiveness. And I do think like again going back to it, like if you're a competitor and you're a goalkeeper, you will do everything in your power to make sure that ball doesn't go in the goal, right? That is obviously your technical execution of different movements to make sure the ball doesn't go in the goal, but it's also organization, it's the bravery that it takes, and so I think the players that are the most successful in college soccer are the most competitive players. And I'll get like we have our goalkeeper here at Loyola. She's phenomenal, and she was second team all conference this year. Was conference newcomer of the year last year, and we went on a little preseason retreat. We rented like a big, massive, like 40-person Airbnb, and it had a basketball court, it had a pickleball court, it had all these things,
Yeah.
and us coaches were staying in a hotel, but we would drive by every day just to hang out, and our goalkeeper was in and around every competition.
Yeah.
They played 3v3 basketball. Her team won. They played pickleball. Her team was in the final, right? All these things. And it's not because she's super gifted athletically, but it's just because, like, she has the mindset that she's not going to lose anything she does. She has that mindset in the classroom. She has that mindset on the field. Like, she's going to be pushed to be the best in everything that she does. And I think, like, that's the biggest thing that, I think coaches can look for in players is how competitive are you? Because if you're competitive, then you're going to do, again, everything in your power to come out of games, come out of matches on the right side of the result.
Yeah, that's definitely a really, really, really important skill. Or, well, I don't know if there's a skill, but like the mindset, again, the
Yeah.
competitiveness. I do want to add something, and I want to ask you something about it, but um, I feel it's something important as well. As of course, we want people to be competitive, but you need to be able to separate the competitive at a certain point. So, for example, I enjoy that goalkeeper that will give 90 minutes everything, and they want to win this stupid game or whatever. They want, they push, they do whatever. But if they lose, they understand that life goes on. It's not like I'm gonna be in my emotions all the way because I lost. I'm gonna treat everybody wrong because it was a mistake or stuff like that. Like that competitive, like humble competitiveness of like I'm doing my best and pushing, but at the end of the day, if I lose and I move on. Like I will have another opportunity or I just got beat on whatever.
100%. I as a player, I was the worst loser of all time. Even now, as like a coach, when if we're getting back on the bus and we've lost, a match, then I'm sulking in it for the next couple hours, and I know that that's not the healthy way to react to it, and I would wish I was different with it, but I
Yeah.
agree 100%. I think
Yeah.
the ability to flip the switch from on 100% to being okay like after it is a really underrated you know tool to have in your toolbox.
Yeah, and as a coach, like me being selfish here, I had experience back in the days. Um, Again, we want competitive goalkeepers, but the issue is if you have four really competitive goalkeepers, and I think this kind of opens up how your coaching style is and all stuff like that. How, if I don't know if you have ever dealt with something related, but like how will you deal with goalkeepers and the frustration when they're like you're creating like a competitive environment, and then there's this frustration, and you know how like the group or the training or the mood just shift because of the sense of somebody cannot lose, and then
Yeah.
everybody's such in a bad behavior, or this person has such a strong personality that now everybody's like scared or like stuff like that. Like how do you manage that in some sense?
Yeah, that's the hardest thing to do, right? And it's something that's so unique to our position in goalkeeping, and it's so unique to our position as goalkeeper coaches, because no other coach has to deal with that type of relationship, right? Where every player that's in our training environment is pushing for one spot.
Hmm.
It's very difficult, and I think like the best, right? Like the reality of it is that very rarely do you go through, I would say, 1 year where one goalkeeper plays 100% of the minutes available, right? And that might be through, coaches might make changes based on performance, but also injuries. Like there's so many things that happen. And, the best thing that you can do as the goalkeeper or the second string goalkeeper, right? Because that's what, that's my experience. That's what I was for a lot of the time was whenever that opportunity came, I was going to be ready for it. And I was going to be ready for it because I pushed the number one for, as hard as I could to make him as good as he was. And then, was his biggest cheerleader when it came match day. Right. And that's a really, I think, hard thing to do, but it's very important, right, in the environment. I remember, during my time at Tulsa, we had, a goalkeeper that was coming off of an All-American freshman year, and we brought in a transfer goalkeeper that was a starter in a high-level mid-major Division One as well. And so we had two number one goalkeepers, which is great, but it also presents pretty tough challenges too because they knew they were two number one goalkeepers, and the reality is that they probably would have started at both of them individually would have started at 80% of Division One programs, right? But we were in the environment where only one was going to play, right? And so there was difficult moments when, one maybe thought that, the other one was giving them bad service because they were doing it intentionally. There was ones where, just some difficult moments, and it took time. It took us, sitting down together as a group and as a staff to be like, listen, like the way that we're going, like you're both going to be worse off for it because there's so many
Yeah.
other things that you guys are focusing on other than the game and getting better. And by the end of the time that we had together, right, like they weren't best friends that were hanging out every day off the field, but they were really good training partners, and they would continue to push each other, and there was high fives and good jobs after sets, and again, like when moments came when the starter didn't play, the second guy came in and he played fantastic. And he played fantastic because of the preparation that he was able to put in. And so I think, the environment being you're going to push to make sure that you're the best that you can be. You're going to push the starter to be the best that they can be, and then the chips are going to fall where they fall in terms of who plays on the weekend on match day. But you're always prepared for it, and I think that's the best way that you can, create that goalkeeper culture because again, it's something that's super unique and it can be really difficult to manage.
Hmm. So what advices will you tell like a goalkeeper coach to actually be able to create that environment that we want?
Yeah, I think it's understanding, right? Again, it goes back to relationships, right? Like understanding what each goalkeeper needs from that environment, right? Understanding what, if the one, like if your starting goalkeeper loves that, there's I remember listening to a podcast with Aaron Ramsdale when he's training and he's the one, he loves to do his set last because he likes to, other people to go through, and then he shows that, no, this is how it's supposed to be done. I'm the one, right? There's other ones that like to go first. There's other ones that, different things. And so I think understanding what each individual needs to perform at their highest level, right? Again, going back to it, there's maybe a goalkeeper that you can be really hard on. There's maybe a goalkeeper that you can't be as hard on. But if you're hard on the one that you can't be, then things will bleed into their relationship with the number one goalkeeper or the number two or the number three, wherever they fall at, right? And so I think it is it's trying to it's difficult though because you can't individually cater to each person, right? Because there is like a standard in a team alignment. So I think it's finding as much as you can the combination of making each individual goalkeeper feel like They might not be the number one, but can you make them and give them the attention that the number one gets? And I think that's how you, as a coach, can try to maybe keep those, egos aren't the right word, but kind of keep those
Mhm.
egos in check a little bit.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, ego is kind of one of the right word, like task-oriented ego versus again, like ego-oriented, basically, or self-oriented. Um, Relationships, I do agree with you. Like, biggest one of the most important skills as a goalkeeper coach you need to know is how to connect with your goalkeepers, how to read the environment, how to have tough conversations, how to be like that coach, basically, that person that is gonna be there to really assist you. And with that, you mentioned Stan, and I have heard a lot about Stan. Great goalkeeper coach, I will assume, great coach. What through all your process, your journey, and before we jump to your environment, what do you think have been something that you have learned, or like if you were gonna think about a coach that really marked your life, why you think that person marked your life? Like, what do you learn about him that you believe that has influence in the way that you coach nowadays?
Yeah, I think you take little bits and pieces from every coach that you work with, right? You take bits and pieces in terms of how they run sessions, right? Maybe some of the sessions you love, some of the sessions you don't love, and you take those things and you go with them. But I think, again, you could title this episode "Relationships." Like the,
Mhm.
I think the amount of care, like my favorite coaches, the reasons that they were my favorite coaches were because of how much they cared for me, right? And how much they invested their time in me, and how much, like, again, they made me feel like I was the man, even if I wasn't at the time, right? And so there's, the coaches that make the biggest impact on you personally, you're able to, you want to listen to them maybe just that little bit more, right? You want to do what they say, maybe just that little bit more, right? And so I think the coaches that have made the biggest impacts on me were the ones that took the time to, try to impact me outside of the field, and make sure that, my life was going good, not just my game, right? And I think that is the biggest, like, that's what I just try to, kind of try to bring into yeah, how I interact with players every day on the field is that, yeah, we're going to have difficult conversations during tough moments. I'm going to push you, but you have to know that at the bottom of all that, it comes from love, and it comes from, yeah, the baseline, relationship that we have with each other.
So when developing a goalkeeper, now talking straight to like the way that you do things, like I don't know, what are some advices, or how does that environment look like describe everything that you can think about right now, but
Yeah,
about yourself, about the environment, about the coaching, about like things that you wish you knew early, things that you have figured out, or stuff like that, you know what I mean?
yeah, for sure. I think one of the biggest things, and I think probably the challenge in the college environment, is something that, we had wrote down that we're going to mention and talk about, is just the balance between their development but results, right? Because our job as a coach is to make them the best version of themselves that they can be by the time they're done playing with us. But at the end of the day, my livelihood relies on us winning games and us being successful, right? And so I think the way that I see it is very rarely will you see me doing a session that is just handling. We're never going to have a day that's just handling. We're never going to have a day that's just crossing. We're never going to have a day that's just, right, those kind of baseline technical attributes. What we are going to do, though, is we're going to prepare for upcoming opponents, right? So we might see an opponent that is very direct and likes to cross the ball. And so their individual development will come from, those days that we're working on crossing, or different crossing situations that we might see because of an opponent. And so along that way, right, like they're able to touch all different technical aspects. But I think um, yeah, and players at our level are hopefully having ambitions to play beyond our level, right? And we want to do our job to push them there. And again, the pressure for results at our level is high, but the pressure for results, if you're playing in the NWSL or you're playing in the USL Super League, like that's how you feed your family, right? And
Hmm.
so I think it's a good way to kind of show them, and that's the next level, and that's the attitude to have, where we're going to prepare for opponents and they're going to get kind of individual development through that preparation. And so everything that we do is very tailored to, what we're going to see on match day. And, again, through that comes touching every different technical aspect of goalkeeping.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about like game realistic scenarios and I don't know the Hispanic culture of like ropes and flips, or the German culture of like everything composed, just small technical behaviors, or English with 3,000 volleys. Like, what are your thoughts regarding all these different kind of methodologies and ways of coaching goalkeepers?
Yeah, I think it all has a place, right? It all has a place where, I've been, being growing up in Chicago, I had coaches of all different backgrounds, right? I had coaches that I would finish the session and I would be dead because we were shuffling, jumping, diving, shuffling, jumping, diving, shuffling, jumping, diving, and I would come off the session and be like, oh my gosh, that was crazy. But then I also had sessions where physically the workload wasn't crazy, but I come off and I'm like scratching my head, being like, geez, we just like cerebrally and thought about like a million different things, right? And so I think it all has a place, and like for me, it's finding what different moments, different situations, different opponents call for. I think like going back to the game, realistic scenarios where I think that's obviously like that's where you get the most bang for your buck, right? Where I view my job, throughout the week as making sure that you've seen every possible situation that you might see on match day. And that's never possible because soccer is such a free flowing sport and you're never going to be able to, see every possible situation. But like in a perfect world, right? Let's say we're playing a team that is very direct again and likes to cross the ball. You're going to see across from every possible area that you might get across from. You're going to see different entry balls into wide areas, every possible one that you could theoretically see, right? Again, we're never going to hit all of them, but can we get really close to that so that when match day comes and they're presented with problems, they're like, oh no, I know the answer to that because we did that on Tuesday in training. Or I know the answer to that because, you know, Brady played the same ball to me in this scenario and I had to do the same thing with it, right? And so again, like little bits and pieces, I think there's moments for sure for like kind of a confident session where it's all right, let me hit you like you were saying with a million volleys so you feel really confident about catching the ball and you're really feeling powerful with stepping and diving, and all those things. But I think I see it almost as a disservice to the players and the goalkeepers if you're not giving them those situations and those environments to prepare them for the situations that they're going to see in match day.
Yeah, I agree. So if well, that's a huge one. Like creating those environments that you're gonna see on Matchman, like a control environment where you create like I don't know, this team plays more cutbacks. So of course we're gonna try to recreate the different styles of cutbacks that exist. But I think there's that misunderstanding, or I'm a big believer about this. Like players are obsessed with goalkeeper practice. So goalkeeper practice being called those 30, 40 minutes that you have with them doing certain activities, same as coaches, without really realizing that like whenever the goalkeeper goes to the field players, like that's the most realistic scenarios and that's where you actually get to really, really, really coach. And that's something that I have learned a lot. Like of course I'm doing video and stuff like that, but my feedback is not gonna be like, oh, good job at jumping this cone or good job using your footwork on this. Of course, like my feedback, I want to see more of the things that we have implemented in practice on those 5v5 scenarios of like, okay, great job at using the footwork on these moments, but the footwork is not how they move through a cone, but the footwork is like, how do you move from A to B, if given that specific feedback. And I think most of that growth come from those scenarios that we're talking about, like 5v5, 11v11. So again, goalkeepers will get upset because you only have 10 minutes with the goalkeeper coach, but I think we need to kind of open our eyes sometimes on the sense like of course goalkeeper practice is fun and you get to do this and enjoy it, but you get a lot of growth from those 5v5 of playing in recess for all those things
For sure.
that
And I think like I think that's something that maybe early on in my coaching career, like we would finish that 30 to 40 minutes and I would take my gloves off and I'd be like, great, job's done. And I
yeah.
maybe wouldn't give the feedback or be as intentional with my job when it did get to those moments. Whereas like 100%, like you said, like that's the most realistic you're going to get. That's the most impactful maybe feedback that you're going to be able to give is during those moments where the game's the best teacher. Like there's nothing that we
Hmm.
can do in creating an environment that's going to exactly replicate the game. And so, yeah, being in the goal, being behind the goal, and giving feedback in those moments is again something that maybe I didn't do early on in my career. That yeah, you see a ton of growth and improvement from the players during those moments.
Yeah. I want to hear your thoughts or like the things that you adapt about it as well outside of the field. Like I know before, of course, in Southern Miss, I didn't because it was less coaching and stuff and stuff like that. I have different roles that I needed to fulfill. But now that I am in UM, I'm lucky enough that I have more resources, more time to like bring to a goalkeeper. So of course now I'm able to like stick with the IDPs. I'm able to give feedbacks, cut all this video, do this video, go through all these small details, compare, find examples, like you were saying, going to Y Scout looking for WSL,
Mhm.
all this stuff, right? What are some stuff that you kind of bring up to a table as well for goalkeeper coaches to kind of have an idea of like, oh, I probably should start doing that if I have the time. I'm lucky enough because I'm with Miami. I'm not sure how things look in Loyola, but like I would like to hear if there is any things, any advices that you will be telling goalkeeper coaches that they can start implementing in order to develop their goalkeeper in the best way.
Yeah, for sure. And I think again, like you're saying, it definitely varies from, place to place in terms of what you're able to provide. Like I know at Tulsa, my only job and my only role was the goalkeeper. So I was able to go, you know, 100% of my time was dedicated to those things, right? Like your IDPs, your film, your all those things. Whereas, moving to Air Force, moving to Loyola, right? Like you gain more responsibility, you gain more roles, like things change. But I think like if you have, right, if any goalkeeper coaches have like time for one thing and they're really only able to focus on like one thing to bring to their goalkeepers, it's the film. The film is that's like that's the one, right? Like I think like if you're only able to invest your time in giving your goalkeepers maybe like one deliverable thing, it's got to be the film breakdown, right? Because I think that's where all that knowledge of the game comes from, and that's how you grow it, right? Like again, there's so many things that you can say and do in sessions, but the game's the game. The game's the teacher, and the way you do film too. I think like the ability to have it be conversational, to be like, hey, what did you think in this moment? It's not me as a goalkeeper coach telling you that you did this movement wrong. It's not me telling you that you were in the wrong position at this time, but it's okay. Why were you there? Why did you move like that? Why did you stay on your line as opposed to going? Why did you go as opposed to staying? Right? Like those things. I think you present if you present questions and you challenge them in that manner, I think you get a lot more out of it rather than kind of telling them
Yeah,
I know this
100%.
because I'm the coach. Yeah,
Yeah, 5,000%. I think like that sticks on the player mind in a sense of if I tell a goalkeeper like, "Hey, make sure you're jumping with the right knee next time." Like, okay, they will listen and then get out. But then
yeah,
if you're able to tell her like, "All right, why are you doing this? What do you think is happening with these players when the ball is coming on this day in this direction? What are these players doing and stuff like that?" Until she gets to the own answer of like, you know what, it actually makes sense that you jump with the right knee. Then that's like that boom moment of like, okay, she got a new concept in her thing. So I'm a big believer that like a lot of video sessions and stuff like that needs to be on that. And I think I did follow on that trap of being able to always want to intercept and tell her like, no, this is step, no, this is wrong, without being like, okay, let's try to guide it through different things. And one of the feedbacks, because I normally sit with my goalkeepers, and again, I'm really open, and we're lucky enough that we have such a small group that we're able to have conversations. And I remember one of the feedbacks that I received, it was I do too much on the videos. So in a sense of like, okay, this happens, so now I want to address the footwork, and now I want to address the way that she put the hands, and now I want. So the information is really overwhelming at certain point because you have a practice of an hour, and you're giving 3 minutes feedbacks of position, passing, all this stuff. So what do you think are the best way to navigate this? I don't know if you have a struggle with this at some point, or like what do you think is the best ways to just address feedbacks or video sessions?
yeah. I think it's very much like meeting the athletes where they're at, right? And I mean that by saying we'll have one goalkeeper that in the film maybe wants to get really really gritty in the weeds about different technical aspects. Like she'll focus on one individual step that she made and how that led to different things that happened, right? So maybe with her you're able to dive deeper and give that really really in-depth conversation, right? There might be another goalkeeper that, like, not that she doesn't care, but she doesn't want to get as deep and in depth as that. And so I think, doing when you're in the group again, like how can you cater to the group, but also make it personal and individualized and give the people what they want and meet the players where they're at, right? Like our head coach always says that, like, I think a big misconception for players is that, like, it's our job to, right, like, develop you. I think
Mhm. Yeah, great.
development's a very individual process, right? It's a very individual process because if player X is already like at this skill level and player Y is already at this skill level and they're both doing the same like minimum, then they're going to improve, but they're going to improve at this same standard and there's still going to be that gap, right? Whereas if the player that's there takes their development a lot more seriously and this player is doing kind of just what we do as a normal team, then, right, like that gap's going to go the other way. And so I think the my thing that I've enjoyed the most is again, like, meeting the players where they're at, and we might have a whole goalkeeper group film session, but then one of the goalkeepers wants to come in and show me five more clips that I didn't have on the presentation, and then we talk about that thing. So I think it's really important to I think the biggest thing is, like, kind of put your ego aside as a coach to not always have to prove to them how much you know.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have to prove to you that I know every technical aspect of goalkeeping. I have to meet you where you're at and help you with what you need help with,
Hmm.
like what's the biggest thing at that time. So I think, like, that's one of the biggest things that I think you know, change that I think, I'm conscious of is, like, all right, every time I give a goalkeeper presentation or every time I give a scout to the team or every time that I do these things, like, it's not my time to prove to you how much I know. It's my
Yeah.
time to give you, the information that you need to be successful.
Hmm. I'm also curious on the way that you approach video sessions. Me, if I'm honest with you, I normally go practice, and then after practice, if I have the time that day, I will do it after that, or probably I might accumulate some practices and then do like the cutting. So how does it work for you? Like, do you go practice straight to the office, cut videos, send, or like is the player the one that is always bringing the videos? You're not working on those things, you're just posting them. Like, how does that looks in your environment?
Yeah. So now I think, again, like when I was at Air Force, it was very much like, because of the military aspect of it, like we would see the players at training and then we never saw them again throughout the day because they were in class from, they had to wake up at 6, make their bed, and then go to class until we trained. And then after we trained, they had
Wow.
to go do different like, right. So like that's different than what we have now here at Loyola. So at the time at Air Force, I was able to really just kind of get in my zone with video because that's all I really had to do because there wasn't a ton of interaction with the players post training, pre training. Whereas now, right, players are constantly in the office talking about different things. So it takes away a little bit of time. But I will say, like, going back to that, development being individual, like, we'll always discuss match things as a group. Pre match, we'll discuss what we'll see. Post match, we discuss what we saw. But the training aspect of it is very individual. And so again, we have Spidio, so every session is recorded. If I'm sharp that morning, I'll remember to bring my GoPro and have it be a little closer so we have a different angle of it. Um, but so if girls are having questions about training stuff, that's a lot on them, and that's something I think a growth that we've really seen is players coming in to discuss training and bring up clips of training where it's like, hey, if you want to get to this next level, you come to me to tell me what you thought was right, what you thought was wrong, and then we can have that conversation. So yeah, again, in the environment right now, everything that we do as a full group is match stuff, and then questions or individual development further. The girls kind of come with different clips to discuss.
That's great. And you mentioned Speedo, so I want to give like an advice. I probably you already do it. I don't know, but I started doing this, and I thought like, well, why in the world I never thought about this before? And it goes back to that part, like whenever I finish goalkeeper practice, After I finish that, they go to their team. What I do is I bring the iPad with me. Then I'm able to be tagging, live tagging during practice.
Hmm.
So that way I don't need to go back and watch the practice, or the player doesn't need to go back and watch the practice. But it takes me like literally 1 second just to press like a goalkeeper, feedback, review, mistake, goal, touch, or whatever. And then the player can go back and then just tag that. So if you're a college coach, they use this video. Again, for me, it was eye opening. I don't know if people were already doing it. And if they were doing it, thanks for telling me. You never told me. So that's an advice out there that I want to throw. Um, all right. Just some few questions. I know we have been over an hour, so I want to be mindful about your time. But you went from coaching men's in Tulsa to a female version. So how did that transition go? Things that coaches need to be aware when dealing with the two different kind of genders.
Yeah, I think no, I think the biggest thing that maybe the misconception, not mis, but like the thought that I had making the switch was all the off the field stuff, right? And being making that switch. But I do think like maybe the misconception about the female player is that they are like they don't want to be coached as hard as the male player, which
Hmm.
I think is very very far from the truth. Like I
Hmm.
don't think people give the average female player enough credit for like how much they do want to be pushed and they want to be coached and they want to be um, yeah, they want to be interacted with just like the men's player is. And so I think that was eye opening for me where like coming to the female environment where yeah, players are still asking high level, technical questions, tactical questions. Players are still, wanting to get in the nitty gritty of film, wanting to be pushed to be the best version that they possibly can be. And so I think like the difference in that aspect like wasn't as dramatic as I thought it would be.
Hmm.
And I do think there's maybe right there's different ways that you can convey information, which I think is maybe something to have the back of the mind. Right, there's obviously there's things that coaches have said to a male player that you definitely can't say to a female player, right? But that's just respect and relationship based, right? Like
Yeah.
that's not. I think you see stories all the time about male coaches getting fired in the female profession because of things they said where like you say that stuff to a man, you're still getting fired, right? That's just a lack of respect to players, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not. I don't think it's as dramatic as you think, but I do think right like the on the field stuff is different, right? And I think it's different because the game is there's different requirements of a goalkeeper in the female game as there is in the men's game, right? Like just off the top of my head, right? Like I think the services that they see are different, right? Like there's maybe not as many like whipped services as there are maybe more lofted services, right? And so I think the way that you train in those different environments is, or the just the different types of services, different things that you give the players, just based off of again, just going back to based off the match, and the match looks different sometimes on the men's side versus the female side. But I do think um, again, going back to it, like I don't think the difference is as dramatic as maybe some people on the outside looking in think it is. There's still really high level players that want to compete at a really high level, and you have to train them at a really high level. And again, like the interactions that you have with them, just like on the men's side, are all based in respect, respect for each other, respect for them as people, and if you keep that like if you keep that in the back of your mind when you're on the men's side, you're going to be successful. If you keep that in the back of your mind on the women's side, you're going to be successful.
Yeah, I agree. And it's I love that you mentioned that about like the female as well. And what is something really eye opening for me is like how people can jump straight away to judge the sport right away. These athletes, the amount of work these people do is incredible. The way they push to practice, go to classes, wake up early, nutrition, eating, and all of this, especially at Division One, is like really impressive. It's until you get to the environment, you don't really get to realize like all of this as well. And I agree with you. Like it's kind of the same thing. Like again, you're coaching the athlete. You're not coaching the male or you're coaching the female. You're coaching the athlete, and the respect needs to be there in the males, in the female. That's crucial. The technical aspects needs to be there. I love that you mentioned that about like the deliveries, the different type of distribution and tailoring your things to your practice. But that's the same with the men. So like if you're playing Premier League, it's gonna be different, and you're tailoring your practice to La Liga. Same with the female. Like if you're playing the ACC, you're tailoring it to the ACC. If you're playing Sunbelt, you're tailoring it to the Sunbelt. So I think that was a great point to bring. Um, just a couple more questions. Last question regarding all of this, and then we're gonna go just a little bit more personal. But like, um, you have been through different colleges, right? Different aspects, different environment, different head coaches. I feel as a goalkeeper coach, the role can vary a lot depending on the university and stuff like that. Like on this university, I might have this responsibility as a goalkeeper coach. On this, or stuff like that. I might be heard more on this university, not on this. At the end of the day, your boss is your head coach. And of course, the relationship you have with the head coach is crucial and all those stuff. So I don't know to whoever is listening, a goalkeeper coach that is wanting to go to college, like what do you think are some myths or some recommendation or some things that you think you have seen through different stations, through different colleges that you can like share or just give advice on?
Yeah, I think the like any profession, right? Like it is what you make it, and it is the people around you, right? And so I think the taking the kind of taking following the lead of the head coach is how become as trusted as you can, and you can continue to move up the ranks. And different coaches are different coaches are worried about, not worried, but like have priorities differently, right? Like, so for example, us here at Loyola, we just finished our first year as a staff, right? Like head coach got here, all of us assistants got there. So like the biggest thing for us in this first year is building the culture to look like what we want it to look like, right? I was at Tulsa, where this is our the head coach that I played for. This is his 31st year as a Division I men's head coach. So he really wasn't too. The culture was set, right, and it was about different things like training habits and training at a high level. And not saying that we're not focused on that at Loyola, but there's just different priorities, and you have to follow the lead of what the head coach is looking for to be the best assistant that you can be. I think my biggest advice is like, I think it was I think I saw like the Arizona State football coach Kenny Dillingham say this on an interview or something. But like when you're a young assistant and you're working up your way, like make yourself, like if you were to leave and not be there, like make yourself irreplaceable, right? Like take on things, do those things to the best of your ability to make you like irreplaceable, right? Like make sure that you know you're doing everything that you can to do everything that you do at the best of your level, so that if for some reason you're not there, then like people notice that you're not there because of all the things that you do and how well you do it. And then I think like the last thing that I learned, especially I when I was at Tulsa, I went from 1 week in the fall semester being teammates with all these guys to then the spring semester I was their coach, right? So that was a really difficult adjustment for me, and I think it helped me grow and mature as a coach. But like I think one thing that young coaches on the male or the female side, like your job as an assistant coach is to be a mouthpiece for the head coach, right? Everything that comes out of your mouth should be in alignment with what the head coach says and what the head coach thinks. And every decision that he or she makes, you're behind 110%. Because I think early on, I was kind of focused on or worried about, or like I wanted players to like me. I wanted players to enjoy when I was at training. I wanted to be, maybe a little bit of relief when the head coach was being really, really hard on players. I kind of wanted to be maybe a shoulder that they could come to. Whereas like that's 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 a way to divide a staff really, really quick, and that's a way for a head coach to not trust you and not rely on you. And so I think being that mouthpiece to understand that like everything that the head coach says, like I got to say too. The way that the head coach is acting in this moment, I got to act. If the head coach is being a little more like, if we're having a fun session, then like, all right, we can enjoy the session a little more. If it's a difficult session and it's going to be a hard like film session where we're talking about some things that we did really poorly, then I've got to be that same attitude and that mindset going in. And so I think, that mindset that you're not there to be a player's friend, you're there to, be a coach is the way that, I've found, you do gain, like, it's kind of like reverse of what you think, but like players want that. Players want to be pushed. Again, going back to that, players want to be pushed. And if you push them, in that right way, then they're going to gain respect for you a lot quicker than if you're just joking and kind of buddying around with them.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned that finding the right people that you enjoy being around is crucial. Not only that, but like you were saying, like we as coaches, we should be on the same page, and it's the same with our goalkeeper union and all this stuff. There should be a space, a room where we can disagree. And I think it's important to have this communication. Same with the goalkeepers. Like if the goalkeepers come to our office and we talk about this and we disagree and stuff like that, we can discuss, we can see each other points. Like it's not all about me. It's not all about the head coach. I think the head coach needs to provide that opportunity as well to be on the same page as all the stuff. But the moment that we step out of that door, we are on the same page. I think that's a important skill to have. And if you disagree with the stuff, know when to disagree with those stuff. Like you said, you can have a training session and the coach said something, and then you go back on there and you tell like, "Ah, why is this guy saying this or doing this?" Because that's where teams get separated. I think that's where like a lot of players start losing respect or stuff like that just because you want to fit or be friend with that person. You know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, your boss is your head coach. Those are the ones that pay the bills.
Mm.
Well, the other thing important, what do you think a person should, like somebody looking forward to get into college or coaching, what they need to start doing right away?
Yeah, I think just like again, going back to my favorite word, relationships, right? Like every job that I've gotten has been because of relationships I've had, right? Like when I moved to Air Force, the coach that was there, he was the goalkeeper coach there, and we had worked camps together. We had gone out to recruiting events and sat next to each other, and then he got named head coach, and he reached out to me, and I reached out to him, and we were like, let's do this. And then same thing here at Loyola, right? Like because of people that I had known from my club that I grew up playing for, I was able to get in contact and do this. And so I think like putting yourself out there, when you're a young coach working, just trying to find opportunities to get in and around people that could be your coworkers, in and around people that could be your boss. And then obviously being really, really good once you're there, right? Like I go back to talking about that University of Denver camp that I worked, all the way back at the beginning of the podcast when we were talking. Like I kept getting asked back because I did a good job when I was there. The Air Force head coach hired me because we had worked together and I did a good job there, right? There were also coaches that didn't get asked back because when they were there, they weren't right putting on good sessions or they weren't doing
Yeah.
great things, right? And so I think putting yourself in those environments is super important, right? Just like we tell players to get in front of college coaches and play in front of college coaches, like it's really
Hmm.
important for other coaches to coach in front of other coaches, to coach with other coaches, because you never know who 2 or 3 years down the line is going to be a head coach and you're applying to be their assistant. You never know when you're a head coach and you're looking for assistants and you ask someone and they're like, Brady was a jerk when I worked this camp with him. Like, no, I don't want to go work with him. Whereas if they do have a good time, then yeah, I want to come work for you, right? So I think putting yourself in environments where you meet people, you work with people, and then obviously the baseline is doing a really, really good job every time that you're out, representing your university, representing yourself. And yeah, that's the way to, I think, kind of climb the ladder and expand your network.
Yeah, and starting somewhere as well. I don't know you probably, but when I started, it was basically volunteer. Like I wasn't expecting to get a lot of money, and that's the reality of it. Like you need to start somewhere, start building that experience, and like you said, show people that you can do it. So I think that's crucial. Say more JS, get into the ODP. Like I wouldn't be in Miami if if I wouldn't have said yes to ODP because ODP lead me to Southern Miss and stuff like that. So knowing people first of all, yeah, and then starring and don't expecting don't expecting all the recognition right away. Like you need to build.
Mm,
This is a process, and that's the reality of it. As a goalkeeper coach, most of the time you will carry that underdog thing, and that's just part of it. Last two questions. One of them really informal, just to judge people, and the other one just to know or for you to share a little bit more. So, Before jumping on those questions, again, I just wanted to thank you for your time. I think this is the longest episode that I have had so far. It's gonna be 1 hour and 30 minutes. I'm impressed for my English.
I know you're crushing it, huh?
Yeah, I'm done for today. I'm not gonna speak more English the whole day. But thank you because again, really humble of like jumping in the call, spending all this time, and honestly, I learn a lot. So I appreciate you for this time. The question that I wanted to give you. So let's say everything that you have known is gone. Everything that you have shared with your players, you have shared with your friends, with your family, everything is gone. Um, you only have three advices, three tips, three learning things that you get to share to everybody that is listening to this episode or whatever. What three advices will you give? Like this can be to goalkeeper, this can be just live, or this can be for a coach or whatever. Like what will you give them?
Yeah, I would say, right, like the first one is put your head down and work hard, right? Like I think any aspect of life, right? We talk about it with our players, like class, community service, practice, game, like you can get a long way by just purely working hard, right? We talk about knowing people and we talk about all those things, but you got to just work hard in whatever you're doing. And I think, along that way, like I, I think what you said, like I love, just say yes to things. Like some of the best times I've ever had out with my friends is because I said yes when I was tired. Some of, the most fun or the coolest places I've ever visited were because I said yes to wanting to go on recruiting trips. Some of the, you know, all these things like I mean, we were talking about my art. I met my fiance because I said yes to working a summer camp, and she was working there too, right? And so I think you can get so many places in life by just saying yes and experiencing, you know, things that you otherwise wouldn't. And then my last one is super simple. It's just like just be a good person. Like, like I think you can get again talk about how far you can get in the world by saying yes and by working hard, but like there's so many every like second you're out in public, you have interactions with people. And it is so easy to just be a good person. And when you look at it and you zoom out and you see that like good things happen to good people isn't a cliche because it's not just a cliche because it sounds good, like it's a cliche because it's true.
Yeah.
And along this journey and along life, like you find and interact with a ton of people and being nice and just being a good person is like the simplest thing that you can do to enjoy your own life because life's pretty bad when you're just negative all the time. It's fun when you're around people and you're being good with people and you're around nice people and fun people. And um, yeah, I think those three things are like stuff that I probably don't remind myself of those three enough. But like, yeah, I think everything you can accomplish a lot by focusing on those three.
Yeah, I love the tree, especially the last one, because again, back to the joke that you mentioned, we can name this relationship like the title of the whole thing, relationship, because being a great person, of course, brings you to creating more profound relationships. Creating more profound relationship brings you to more opportunities, to most yes, to all this stuff. So I think that's great. Just be a good person. You know what is being a good person, and you know how good of a person you are is because all the type of people that you have around you. So that's really good. Thanks for sharing. Last question to see if we're still friends or not. Best gloves of goalkeeper.
Best brand or
Yeah.
best like individual glove?
No. Best brand. Best brand. Give me a
Best
best brand.
brand. All
Yeah.
right, I got to rep my boys. N1 goalkeeping. My guy. I think you might have interacted with him too, but Ricky
Yeah.
Cabello in Oklahoma City. Um, I during my end of my time in Tulsa, worked a ton of camps with him, and now he's worked his way up, working for N1 goalkeeping, and yeah, they're fantastic to me. They're fantastic to our goalkeepers at Loyola, and they're massive brand in South America and are starting to take over and grow here in the United States. And so yeah, I will say I didn't have them when I was playing, so I was repping some other glove brands when I was playing. Yeah, anytime you see me now anywhere, always repping my guys over at N1.
Awesome. That's great. If people want to learn a little bit more about you, where can they find you? What do you think is the best way?
Yeah, you can find me on all your good social media platforms at Brady underscore Moody. Um, yeah, I have links to my YouTube channel that I'm really not up to date with all my sessions. But yeah, anything and everything you can find me on there, and obviously follow along with Loyal Chicago Women's Soccer.
Perfect. Awesome, Brady. Thank you. Thank you very much again.
I appreciate it. I know I love to talk, so thanks for listening.
No, that was great. I appreciate it.